January the 28th, 2024. Note it down. 2 all-time great test matches culminated today. West Indies beating Australia at the Gabba, their first win against Australia anywhere in the last 20 years. England winning from behind in Hyderabad, becoming the first team to win with a 100-run deficit in India ever. I'm Rana. I still can't quite comprehend what's happened. And with me to make sense of it all is Ben Gardner. Mark Butcher will be joining us later today. It was a majestic day to seal a totally bonkers win for England. They started it 126 runs ahead, but with only 3 second innings wickets left. Pope, Rahan Ahmed and Tom Hartley eked England's lead up to 230, more than enough to bowl at. India may well rue the decision to hold back Bumrah for so long, especially with that new ball. The England defence was all about Tom Hartley, the debutant, who endured such a tough opening 2 days as a test cricketer, was totally brilliant, especially given the state of Jack Leach's knee. Hartley ended up with 7 wickets. It's the second best figures by an English spinner on debut ever. The best in 91 years, and he's the third England spinner to take a 5-foot on debut under Ben Stokes. First, both Jaiswal and Gill in the same over, both via sharp catches by Ollie Pope under the lid. Then the big one, Rohit Sharma with one that slid on with the arm. Axar Patel was promoted up to 5 to break up that string of right-handers. He was next to go for 17. And then after tea, Root and Leach got into the act, but the standout dismissal was surely that of Jadeja, run out sensationally by Ben Stokes. Barrett and Ashwin then resisted admirably in a stand that quickly went from annoying to dangerous, whittling down the target from 112 to just 54 before Hartley bowled Barrett with an absolute beauty, and then had Ashwin and then Siraj stumped soon after. A totally insane England win. A first innings deficit of 190, almost no second innings runs from their middle order heavyweights. Their number one spinner was nursing an injury for most of the test match, and their debutant, whose first ball went for 6, ended up taking 7 in the second innings to seal what is right up there with, or maybe on top of, any other win in the Bazball era. Ben, as you said towards the end, who'd have had a shootout between Ollie Pope and Tom Hartley for the Player of the Match award after day one? I mean, even by England standards, a totally insane result. That stat, I couldn't believe it, because they mentioned it a few times in the commentary. It's the first time that a team has won with a more than a 100-run deficit in India. But when they actually got the numbers up, it's 65.
Yeah.
So it's better by 135 runs in the history of Test cricket in India.
Yeah, and when you say, it's up there with the best wins in the Bazball era, it's well out clear, I think. And Ben Stokes was saying that at the end. And actually, you're really struggling to think of when was the last time England had a win that kind of comes close to that. Because, we kind of had this discussion at the start of the last tour of India when they had that brilliant win. But that was on a pitch when England they had some experience. They'd just beaten Sri Lanka on 2 similar surfaces, a flatter wicket that played a little bit more to their strengths, where actually the toss kind of mattered a bit more than it did in this game.
Not as strong in India attack as well.
Yes, yeah, and that time I think we were looking back and thinking that, okay, you're probably going back actually to the first test in the West Indies in 1990, which I think has similarities to this in terms of beating the best in the world in their kind of prime conditions. Okay, maybe a team slightly on the way down in both cases, but still like great size in great eras. I think that's as far back as you're going for a win that compares this one. So I think has to be the best win this century and the best under Stokes. And
I mean, Stokes was adamant at the end that this was top.
Yeah, and it's just because also it's just amazing how much this team still does actually surprise you. Like it shouldn't surprise you much. It shouldn't be surprising since the 4th test of that summer when they chased 3-8, having been down and out about 3 different times in that game, and having already done it 3 times in the series before that against New Zealand. Like, we know that this team comes back from ridiculous situations again and again, and we've seen it again and again, and we know that they take unusual decisions and those pay off, and yet we're still debating in the lead up saying, I don't know if picking Hartley and Rahan Ahmed is the right call, and obviously it shouldn't be the right call. Obviously you should need to play warm-up games, and yet there is, as much as it's madness, there is a lot of logic that infuses it. I guess we'll talk a lot about Hartley, and it's not, I don't want to, reduce him just to that release height thing, but you can see why they look at that, because you can see how that has such an impact. Like, when it comes to a day like today, the balls that are a bit shorter might just keep so low that you can't attack them. And if you're taller, the balls that are fuller you have kind of a bit more margin there because they could bounce that bit more. So it totally makes sense that it could work. And they have, that's in a way an anti-Bazball pick. It's a very data-driven pick, and it's completely paid off. And again, not playing those warm-up games, we've heard from Ollie Robinson in the pre-test podcast about what they did there. They went and played on those absolutely ragging surfaces and said to the batters, you can't complain. You'll get hit, you'll do sweep shots, and you'll get out, and that's fine. Because you can't complain. You just have to get used to it. And we saw the benefits of that through that first innings as well. And they got a lot of stick for that decision as well. So, I mean, they will be sitting there feeling very, very, very content with themselves. And they have every right to, because this is an absolutely miraculous win that has been... It's been made with Root making 31 runs in the game. He was England's worst player pretty much. And they pulled off their best ever win.
He bowled all right first innings.
That's true. Yeah. Wood was their worst player. All due respect to Wood. And he bowled well in the second innings.
He bowled very well
actually
today. Yeah. No, totally mad on so many levels. I thought Hartley bowled absolutely brilliantly today. I mean, I was looking at his career earlier today. One first-class fifer before today. I think only one fourfer. So often he sort of performed a holding role for Lancashire last year. He averaged 44 in the county championship. Obviously didn't go that well for him in the first innings, expensive on the first day, but even on the second day where he was slightly more economical, his control wasn't great. What went so well for him in this innings? Why did it change?
Well, and again, partly this is just down to the fact that Tom Hartley is he is a very talented bowler, and they have seen something in him, and that is innate to him. We shouldn't avoid giving him credit. It's not just the conditions, and it's not just how he was backed. It's because
he's some very good spinners on show in the last couple of days, and it's Hartley who's emerged with the 7-foot.
Exactly. I mean, he has comprehensively outbowled Ravindra Jadeja in this test, who is, his record stands up with the great left-arm spinners in the game's history. Having said that, I think you have to give Ben Stokes a lot of credit for how he handled Hartley on that first evening, and he spoke about it at the end of the game. He those first 3 overs, he goes for more than 30 runs, hit for 2-6 in that first over, and he doesn't put him out of the attack. And he says, well, I've picked this guy because I back him. I can't not back him now. And Hartley bowled a little bit better from that point onwards in that innings, a little bit better on day 2, and now into day 4, he bowled magnificently. And Stokes' handling of spin is
extraordinary.
Incredible.
You were the one who picked out that stat about 3 debutants now who've taken 5 as a spinners under Stokes. I think when people talk about Bazball, that term, there's a lot that's lost in that term and isn't encapsulated by it. I think one, almost the emotional intelligence to sort of realise, as he said at the end of the play, that this is a really long test, this is a really long tour. I'm going to need Tom Hartley. I need to make sure, regardless of what happens for the next 20 minutes, I'm going to need Tom Hartley. So to stick to that and be clear-minded enough to understand that in the heat of the moment when he's going at 7s is really impressive. And then number 2, and again Stokes alluded to this at the end of play, Stokes is a very good reader of cricket matches. He said that he was looking at what Rohit Sharma was doing as captain, how he was managing the 2 left-arm spinners and learning from the fields that he was setting. And actually, I thought today England's fields were much, much more conservative than they have generally been. There were times where I was sort of screaming at the TVs, like, get another catcher in. There were times on day 2 when Hartley was quite expensive, but the fields were really attacking. So Hartley was bowling pretty much with no one straight on the leg side. He had someone at sort of short mid-wicket, silly mid-on-ish. And if he bowled full, it was very easy for right-handers to just knock it into that gap and normally picked up 4. Today, there's much, much more cover. So if Hartley erred in length, it went for 1 rather than 2 or 4. And that was something that Stokes, I think, learned over the test match, that there are different ways to be attacking, and you can be attacking in different ways with different bowlers.
Yeah, but he has done that before as well, I think. And actually, I think it's not a case of all-out attack. It's a case of all-out commitment to the plan that you're going with. And we have seen that. I mean, actually, in a way, a bit of a defining feature of some of those games when England had those crazy comeback chases. They started in the 3rd innings when England were pretty content to sit in and kind of put the game on hold and say, okay, you do some running here. And teams would think, like, oh, actually, how many do we need to make here? And then get themselves in a bit of a muddle and leave England enough that's a total that looked like it should be enough, but wasn't definitely too much. And then England would go and do it. And you saw it in Pakistan last year as well. That first test, it wasn't as if England came out and blew Pakistan away in that first innings with brilliant bowling. They were just content to sit in. They'd scored quickly enough that they could kind of wait till the wickets came to them. And again, that was the case here, that fewer runs to defend, but you also know that the pitch is going to do enough to get you some wickets. So if you can ensure that they're not scoring runs freely in between times, then it's kind of a classic way to win a test on the subcontinent. You wait for 10 balls to do something, having got far enough ahead in the game. But it's one thing saying it, and another thing believing in it totally to do it, which is what they managed to do so brilliantly, I think.
And just a word for Rob Key as well, because it was really brave to go for Hartley and Shoaib Bashir. I've talked a lot about how I thought the decision to have Hartley over Dawson, who had such a good summer, was probably the wrong one, and it was perhaps naive in terms of thinking that only one type of spinner can succeed in India, etc. But it's a brave call that has worked. And actually, if you look at the brave decisions that England have made in the last 2 years under Key's ultimate leadership, they by and large got them right. I know that people would quibble about Bairstow versus Stokes during the Ashes, but that was a really difficult call. Sort of, whatever way they went, they were going to get criticism for it. But in terms of like player identification, I think they've been really good. Ben Duckett was not anyone's idea of a test match opening batter. He predominantly bats at 3 or 4 for Notts. His style of batting is definitely not that of a normal test match opener. And he's now had success basically in every series he's played in. And now Hartley to come in game 1. There's clearly thinking behind him coming in, and then also there's actually decent preparation. These spinners spent a lot of time in the UAE this winter. Hartley and Bashir would have been there before Christmas, and they would have gone there after Christmas. So he deserves a lot of credit, because England have been in positions before where the spinners could potentially win them the game towards the end of the game and not quite managed it. Neil asks, guys, I can't wait for your podcast after that today. I stayed awake after nights to watch it. Also, I think that explains me being a bit emotional. What a comeback. Anyway, from the presentation, Rohit Sharma must win the award for the most unbasable statement ever when he said, after our first innings and their first innings, I thought we were very much in the game. Well spotted. India were really passive at points during this test match. A lot of people are unhappy with Sharma's captaincy, and they've gone on a little run here, which is sort of unusual for them. They lost in South Africa. They also lost a game towards the end of the Australia series last year.
So it's 2 out of 3 defeats at home, isn't it?
Yeah.
Having 2 defeats in 10 years.
Yeah. What do you think India could have done differently overall in the test match, but also today?
Well, let's start with overall, because in a way, if they lost it today, I almost think that they lost it in the morning session. I mean, actually batting on this pitch, chasing 220 was always going to be tough. They did okay to get up to where they were. There was a bit of proactivity today in terms of promoting. Akshar Patel didn't quite come off. You could say they could have done a little bit more in terms of I don't know, trying to exert a bit of pressure back, but that could also have worked into England's hands. I mean, we saw in the first innings that they were there where putting pressure back actually helped England, because they would try and hit sixes and get caught in the boundary. And in some ways, I know they made over 400 in that first innings. That's almost the bigger missed opportunity in some ways.
Yeah, I completely agree. Me and Phil were saying this after day 2, that it felt like India left a lot of runs out there.
Yeah, I mean, 8 of the top 9 get to 20, 3 of them get to 80. Like, you should be making 550 and putting the game to bed there. And they didn't do that. There was just and this is something that England have managed to do at times, is to just not quite be killed off and hang on long enough. But that is an area they'll look at. And then we talked about this yesterday, but I guess it's with that Pope innings. I mean, it is, Stokes called it the best innings an England batter has ever played in the subcontinent. He might well be right. So sometimes you just have to hold your hands up and say, well played. Could have done a little bit more to cut off those scoring options, I guess.
Yeah, I think obviously Pope was brilliant square of the wicket, but I think there were a lot of times where he could just drop it for one, and as a result, there was never any prolonged period of pressure on him. When I think Pope was playing well enough that it was understandable to have a few men back, but he had so many men back that at times he didn't have to work very hard for his runs. I definitely think he could have been more aggressive at points during Pope's innings. I thought with the bat, they also almost froze today.
Yeah,
because Hartley didn't necessarily bowl that badly on the first day. Jaiswal it was a premeditated decision to attack him from ball 1. Jaiswal didn't do that today. The other attacking India player against spin, Shreyas Iyer, batted quite tentatively. He didn't really look to take the attack to England. And as a result, Hartley in particular was just allowed to bowl. He was allowed to get into that rhythm, and no one really tried to disrupt it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if you look, I think that Stokes run out was the sort of that's the picture perfect moment of the day. But that it's that first wicket that is so key, isn't it? With how Hartley had gone against left-handers in general and against Jaiswal in that first innings, and they'd started pretty well, scoring at fours for the first, or just under four for the first 12 overs or so. And you think if this goes on, actually, even if you take a few there, then there's enough that they can, or not enough runs left that you can probably knock them off. But Hartley gets him in a proper way to those two first innings wickets, but they were caught on the boundary. This was a clever piece of bowling. Jaiswal coming down the track, Hartley pulling that length back a little bit, gives the catch to Pope, then gets the other one in the same over, and all of a sudden Hartley he's a test match bowler from that point onwards. And also
he gets Rohit with that ball that the skids on as well. That was brilliant.
Yeah, and Pope Stokes' fielding was that bit of fielding was exceptional, but also Pope is a marvel at close into the bat and has done this a few times. There was that catch against New Zealand that was so good it was almost illegal because he was maybe on the pitch at the point of contact with the bat. And folks who had actually not had a dismissal in the game until the penultimate stumping, and I think he still kept well, but there were a few sort of misses that you would, if you're picking a guy for his keeping, those are going to be focused on that bit more. And then those two stumpings were difficult, especially the first one, and so important because India were getting close. England did a lot of things right there. But yeah, that first wicket just made it feel like, oh wait, hang on, aggression is going to struggle as well, I think.
A word on how England batted this morning, because they not far off doubled their lead.
Yeah, and I think, again, a lot of this stuff, we say it's new, and actually, then you think back, so actually, maybe this has happened before, because I think it must have been an Andy Flower thing, that he'd talk about, you wanted from your 8, 9, 10, 11 partnerships of 40, 30, 20, and 10, and then you add 100 runs to your lead if you got a set batter there. And it kind of felt a bit like that. It was just like, let's just take our time here. Like, we're all right.
Hartley sets up very well for number 9.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, and that's that's part of the reasons why he's played games of cricket for Lancs over Matt Parkinson over the years, and again, he did play some big shots, but then also he just batted sensibly and normally. It wasn't like he was sticking around for Ollie Pope, and it wasn't like he was trying to whack quick runs. And I think we actually talked about this earlier, that so much of the battle on spinning wickets is mental because of how those balls that spin loads can get in your head. But sometimes those balls, if they are on the right line and in the right area, they are basically unplayable. If a ball shoots low and turns and it's on the stumps, like, Don Bradman isn't hitting those sometimes. But because they're so hard to hit though, if they are not in that precise area, then they just miss your bat, and then you're fine. So actually, if you can put them out of your head and know what your scoring areas are and know what risks you can take, then actually, like, you have sort of, you kind of see it in Rana and Hartley surviving the exact same number of balls. Is like you have kind of like a shelf life out there, and you make the most of it while you're out there, and they did that exceptionally.
Yeah. Also, on Hartley's spell again, I think that little burst where he got those 3 wickets up top was so crucial, because I think we saw over the last 2 innings of this test match how much easier it was to bat when the ball got soft and got old. It still turned loads, but the pitch was so slow that when the hardness from the ball went, the turn was slow enough that players could react to any turn there was, or if there was any inconsistent bounce. So to get those wickets with the new ball, I think was much more crucial than we perhaps realised at the time. And actually, I think batting conditions were reasonably okay. There was the odd ball that shot low, the odd ball that spit. But I think, as you say, often those extreme balls aren't that threatening because they veer away from the stumps.
Yeah, Leach was actually widened at one point because of how much one was turning. So it's a bit harsh, but I guess what else can you do as an umpire?
But in the end, Pope finishes on 196, and Stokes says that's probably the best innings ever played by an Englishman in Asia. And Root yesterday, I thought, he's probably the man most qualified to make statements on how good innings are in Asia. I thought he did a really good job at explaining why it was so good and how crafting those sort of innings is so difficult, because you've got to make mini judgments all the time, and you've got to get every single one of them absolutely right, and then you've got to have the technical skill to make it work. You got to judge length. You said yesterday how Pope was so clear is he advancing down the pitch? Is he playing forward? Is he going back? He was not once in that innings of 196 caught in two minds. He was brilliant yesterday, obviously, but also very good today.
Yeah, and I was reminded actually of our pre-series chat with Nick Compton.
Yeah,
and how he talked about what it was like batting in the other end with Alistair Cook, and how you knew as soon as the ball was delivered, if you saw the line and the length, you could tell what Cook was going to do. He had almost like a pre-programmed response to it, and it was that clarity that allowed him to have such success on that 2012 tour. And there was shades of that, obviously in a very different sort of way, but it was and again, there was no panic this morning. I mean, also, India have dominated the 6 count in this test. Ollie Pope has not hit a single 6 in that innings, because it wasn't what we've come to associate, or what some people associate with baseball, of this all-out attack. It was just a sensible, attacking, aggressive at times, but not without method test innings.
I thought Kevin Peterson made an interesting point on commentary, in that it is much easier for England to play this way and be brave and do things new than it is for India, where there's so much more pressure. The knives are out. There are so many authoritative voices who have things to say and actually carry a bit more weight than authoritative voices in the UK. Obviously, there have been elements of the UK press that is not quite wanting baseball to fail, but have been sceptical around it. But there's broadly support around what England are trying to do. People understand the context, where it is much harder for India with all the pressure around them. 1.2 billion people for whom it's their number one sport. It's harder to be brave. Do you think that's fair? Because I look at you describe England basically players playing their natural way, playing in ways that enable them to succeed. With JSWAL and Iyer today, I just thought, JSWAL striking at 42, Iyer striking at 42 as well. They are veering away from what works for them, almost out of fear of what could go wrong and what the reaction might be. They don't want to be out caught on the fence again. You could tell almost that the way in which Indian players got out yesterday, in the first innings, affected how they batted in the second.
Yeah,
because there's always going to be a ball with their name on.
And I guess part of that is there's not much India can do about that, because part of that is you go back to the origins of the Stokes McCullum era and taking over with one test win in 17.
So that's what they need.
Exactly. But it does in some ways make it easier to get buy-in for something new, because you're not having success with the previous thing. If India were to go away from what they were doing and it was to go even worse for them, then there would be grounds for criticism in some ways, because it's like, well, what we were doing was working to an extent. What England was doing was so totally clearly not working that you have the freedom, and then also you then have the early success that then allows you to buy that later on. I still don't think England fans have forgotten that one win in 17 stretch that was so miserable.
But everyone remembers the one win before that run, which was actually going 1-0 up in India. So
true.
Could well be 4-1 in a few weeks' time. Peter Ross, I was wondering why Australia sweeping everything last year in India didn't work and saw them criticised, yet seemed to be the right strategy for England yesterday. I think it's just because of that's the way in which these guys attack spin, particularly Duckett and Pope were the two most frequent sweepers. It felt last year when Australia tried that in the first test match as if that was a sort of a diktat from up high, that this is what we as a team are going to do. And it didn't really take into consideration how each individual is most likely to score on. Different players have different strengths. Whereas England, it was very much, Crawley, for example, wasn't sweeping loads. Hartley didn't sweep loads. Rana Ahmed didn't sweep loads.
Yeah, and also I think the reverse sweep and the sweeper, they are different shots. I know that they sound similar, and they sort of look similar, but they do come with sort of different angles and different elements of risk. And also, as we've talked about, it was that every player was sweeping, but it was also how regularly they were sweeping as well. It was almost like a sweeper ball close to at times. Whereas, as we've talked about, Pope was judicious with it. I mean, he used it a lot, but he had the triggers that meant, okay, I'm gonna go for this here. So I think that's what it is. And also, Australia had worked it out pretty well by the end. Winning that penultimate test, having the better of that final test of the series. It's and England have taken the right lessons from how they went as well, with thinking like, okay, actually, inexperienced spinners can do well, and you do need a game plan to score runs, I think. And Australia just happened to maybe have slightly too prescriptive a one and slightly the wrong one in that first test. But it's not as if the thinking behind the sweep strategy overall, or we need a strategy, is wrong necessarily, because it is so alien a challenge. You can't just say to a guy, go out and do this without guidance in the way that you can somewhere else, because he's grown up in all those conditions, because they haven't done that. So yeah, it's understandable to try, and it just didn't have to work for them, I guess.
Without further ado, we've reached the part of the pod where we have to make a decision of who should be rewarded the Charles Tyrwhitt moment of the test. Our friends at Charles Tyrwhitt are no strangers to helping men make difficult decisions when it comes to their wardrobe. Let's be honest, sometimes we can all do with a bit of direction when it comes to what outfit we need for that smart casual dress code. So check out charlestyrwhitt.com or visit one of their stores, and they'll be able to help you look the part with their wide selection of shirts, trousers, blazers, and knitwear. Don't forget to use the code SCORE to get our special Wisden discount of 20% off their full collection. Ben, it's got to be that run out from Ben Stokes to get Ravindra Jadeja. Ben Stokes has produced several magical moments in the field over the years for England. That genuinely might be top. He wasn't even looking with the stumps.
Yeah, well, and I don't know if it's quite as good as some of the other great runner efforts, but I guess it deserves to be in the conversation. But it had elements of lots of them. There's the famous A.B. de Villiers one where he's sort of rolling and not looking and lobs it and it strikes through. And then there's the Bavuma one where he sprints in, and what's amazing is how quickly he gathers and releases. And you had both of those with this, and I think just summed up with the facts that Stokes had no idea whether it was out or not. And there's a great picture of all the England fielders sort of huddling, and Duckett, he must have had the prime position in the field.
Duckett was in a better place than the umpire.
Yeah, and it's just there with his finger raised like that, and then you still obviously have to wait for the confirmation, and also such a massive wicket as well. That of Jadeja, who'd batted so nicely in the first innings, and has that kind of he's got that kind of fighter instinct that could have been so crucial. I think,
especially at that point with the after the wicket of Jadeja, I think there was much less sharp turn, as we saw by that partnership with Ashwin and Barrett. They were both reasonably comfortable. It was ominous for a period when it was only 50 odd to win. You look at those two, and they weren't really seriously tested for a while, and it needed a moment of magic from Tom Hartley to break that partnership. We talked a bit about India already. One more question. What do you think they do in terms of changes to the 11, but also in terms of conditions? Because this was very different to the Chennai pitch in 2021. And that was a flat pitch. Obviously helped that England batted first, then it obviously helped that England batted first here. But that was a more traditional pitch that slowly disintegrated over 4 days. This one, if you bowl it in the right areas, you got significant purchase from day one. By the way, I thought this pitch was brilliant. I like pitches where you can show off how good a bowler you are and how good a batter you are, and this was that pretty much throughout. Yeah.
So, okay, well, in terms of the 11, first of all, they might have an enforced change to make with Jadeja, possibly injured. Dravid says that he hasn't spoken to physio yet, so we don't know, but it didn't look great, and there's just sort of bad whispers around that. So we'll see there, and that would be a really tough decision, because he balances that 11 so well, and you're left either bringing in maybe Kuldeep Yadav for him, but then you've got KS Barrett at number 6. So you've got a decent 6, 7, 8, but they're not all a place too high. But you've kind of it's kind of like having 3 7s, maybe 1 to 7.5. It's not as strong a batter lineup. Or you bring in a batter, and then you Siraj barely bowled in this test. You'd have to bowl a lot more if they did that. So that's tricky. In terms of the pitch, I don't know. I mean, I kind of think that they should just back themselves. Like, firstly, it takes a bit of humility to think that, okay, this England team is a good cricket team, and we are not quite as good as we have been at times in our dominant era. So we might lose the odd game here and there, but we were still close to winning this one, having got quite a lot wrong. And if we just play better, we might well win 3 of the next 4, or 2 of the next 4, and draw 1 or draw a couple or something. And I kind of like that. I personally that's what they should do, but I would not be at all surprised if they were to make a pitch that turns even more than than this one did, and then to bring in Kuldeep Yadav, who, and then have like an England-like attack in terms of, just Bumrah and then 4 spinners and say like, let's see what you've got now, England. They might do that, and I think that's almost the slightly more likely than they do, that they would make the pitches more extreme. But I think the best thing to do from a cricket point of view would just be to they are still a very good cricket team who came very close to winning a game they were not close to their best in, and just back themselves to win 3 tests against an England side, which, as good as this was, these were anomalous performances from 2 players, and hopefully they will be repeated. And there is a chance that is the case, but
yeah,
and if they do, then well played England, I think.
Yeah, I guess I'd say though that Leach was injured. Leach was unable to bowl at his best. Had Leach been fit, the margin of victory I think would have been greater for England. And as well as Hartley bowled, and he was genuinely brilliant today. He's not Ashwin. Ashwin on better batting wickets can use that additional mastery to prize out wickets that Hartley and Leach at the stages they're at the moment are sort of unable to do. So I think that the more it turns, the more England come into it.
Yeah,
almost.
Exactly, yeah.
Although I know India are also wary of what happens if it's flat because of England's scoring rate. I think one of the interesting things of this series will be how India size up England in the same way that Stokes was talking about how he learned from watching India in the field. I'm really interested to see, in particular, Ashwin, how he responds to how England go about things. How does he respond to going at 4.5, 5 runs and over? Because he's one of the great thinkers in the modern game, and he's not going to just do the same thing 5 tests in a row. I'm sure India will come prepared for the second test match, which only starts in a few days, by the way.
Well,
with new ideas.
And that second test, I mean, silly thing to say because it's 5 test series, so all the games are big, but that is absolutely massive because assuming it's not a draw, obviously if England win 2-0 up, very, very hard to come back from that as we've seen. But if India win, you look at actually maybe Kohli to come back,
Shami,
quite possibly Shami to come back, and then actually you've got it's 1-1. India, having won the previous game, they go back to being heavy favourites again. So that game is massive. And you made the point as well that India really missed not just Kohli's runs but his sort of energy in the field. No, I think that was clear. I mean, it was when the ball was when the ball was spinning past the bat. If Kohli was there, and also if Pant was there as well, actually, you would have these whoops and these cheers, and it would feel like the walls were closing in, kind of thing. When the ball spun past the bat in this innings, it just felt like India were a bit like, oh, another time it didn't hit the edge. And when the ball kept low and bowled on, it's like, oh, that's going to be a bit tough when we come out to bat. It didn't at all feel, that there are ways to put pressure on that aren't just bowling and field placements, and they did miss a bit of that because the ball did beat the bat a fair amount in that innings, but England were able to shrug it off, and partly that's to England's credit, but partly India could have done more to, make those sort of mental demons open a bit more, I think. Yeah, well, let's head to Mark Butcher to hear what he thought about that test match. Butch, Ben Stokes said that was the best win yet of his era as captain. That is up there, not just from his era, but all eras.
Right. So this has to come off because that is just utterly staggering. It's unbelievable in the lexicon of unbelievable performances and turnarounds and wins against the head under Ben Stokes. That beats the lot. And I heartily apologise to the team, to the selectors about the preparation, to Ben, to Baz, to Rob Key, to everybody for doubting for a second that they weren't doing the right thing. It's unbelievable. People think that when we sit and do these things, we're gleeful about sort of things when they go wrong for England, and they couldn't be further from the truth. You kind of you look at things logically, and you think, well, it's India, they're brilliant, pitches are going to turn. England have got no price with the sort of the lack of experience they've got, the lack of quality they've got in terms of the bowling attack up against the Indians in their own conditions. And what they've done there is it's staggering, absolutely staggering.
Ollie Pope's knock was staggering. A lot of people who've played a lot of cricket in India have labelled it as one of the best ever by a visiting player. I guess what is so
Rohit knows a thing or two about great innings in anywhere in the world, and he says he can't remember a better one.
Yeah, I think Dravid as well was bigging it up, as was Root, obviously. I guess we've talked a lot about Pope over the years in terms of someone, he wasn't able to always transfer what he was doing for Surrey to England. There's a lot of focus on some of the things he might not be doing right. He's always had the frenetic starts. There was a whole period where he batting on off stump and that wasn't really working for him. But we sort of forget sometimes just how incredibly talented he is. India
and incredibly young.
Yeah. He's only just turned 26 and he's played something like 40 Test matches. There's a period today when it looked as if India had watched Pope bat, and Rohit was playing more reverse sweeps than he was in the first innings, for example. They were trying to do what Pope did, but couldn't quite replicate it. What is the challenge for an English batter going over to India on the turning pitches in particular? What do you have to face that you just don't in England?
Yeah, all right. I mean, the challenge, the way we used to look at it was the first 20 balls was the biggest challenge. You got men around the bat, the ball's turning. You kind of, walking out into the middle under those circumstances can kind of be very, very daunting, and also just incredibly technically difficult. Pick up the length right to judge how much it's turning, to judge, exactly how you're going to survive those first 15 to 20 balls. And we always just used to talk about that. But then actually the biggest challenge, and the thing that Ben and this era have looked at more than anything, which of course is the most important thing you could possibly think about, is how you score. How do you keep the scoreboard moving? How do you stop them from bowling endless maidens at you? How do you stop them from bringing ever more close fielders in? And how do you keep the scoreboard moving forward? Now, I'm guessing that what happened when they went to Abu Dhabi on their camp was that they spoke about that, and they worked endlessly on ways of scoring runs. It sounds, when you say it out loud, it sounds like, well, why the hell wasn't everybody else doing that? But kind of, that's kind of it. So they worked out that sweeping is going to be their best option. Become unbelievably good at it. One thing that you can't do when you're playing practice matches, for example, is you can't really sort of work on something like that, mess it up 100 times and then get it right 300 times, because of course if you're playing for your wicket, you get out, you're out, and then it's back to the nets. So they've identified ways of being able to put them off their game and being able to stop them from crowding the bat and being able to stop them from building pressure. In the first innings, it didn't quite work out. In the second innings, Pope plays an absolute worldie. When it ought to have been more difficult than it was first time round, and it ends up being the difference in the game. And India, as I think we said in the podcast leading up to the Test series, that India's batters have struggled in the conditions that they've been forced to play in as well. And so it's no surprise that they kind of saw that and went, hang on a second, now this might be a way. This might be a way of doing it. But of course, they wouldn't have practiced it as sort of diligently and with as much sort of conviction that was the right thing to do as England. So trying to start doing something like that halfway through a Test match is not going to be quite as successful as people have kind of set their minds to it in the lead up.
Do you think we almost underappreciate the attacking talent that English cricket has in batting at the moment? I mean, the array of reverse sweeps that Duckett and Pope are able to unveil, and obviously we know what Root, Stokes and Bairstow can do. But in India did try to do similar at points during this Test match, but were actually unable to replicate the consistency with which they could execute the attacking shots.
Yeah, but because again, it's difficult to kind of explain. I think it's basically because it goes against the grain of sort of classical batting, I suppose. But then if you're playing in conditions that are not sort of classical conditions, they're not conditions that are, and I'm not using the word fair as if to say it's unfair how India prepare pitches or anything. It's not that. It's just fair, meaning you've got a better than average chance of being able to go out there and play with a straight bat and survive. And if the ball's turning that far, you've got to figure out something else, and you've got to believe in it. You've got to back it. And it's just I'll do it again. It's just hats off to having that total conviction that what you're doing is the right thing to do, and then making it work in such fabulous style.
It's nearly 2 years since Stokes, McCullum, and Key came in, and one thing that always surprises me, even though I've seen it before now, is how quickly games change. You feel it looks like one team is totally in charge, and then within a session, the whole complexion of a game completely changes. If you were captaining against England when they get on one of these moods, like Pope on day 3, for example, what would you do differently to what we've generally seen? There were points in this test match I felt when Pope was properly in, and he what I thought was really impressive is he went up and down the gears depending on what was coming towards him. And when he went down the gears, Rohit gave him lots of easy singles. And I wonder if that's something potentially that, when Pope sort of earns Rohit taking away close fielders and earns fielders going back on the rope. Do you think captains should almost be braver against England when they go on these roles?
Put it this way: the way to counter it is to kind of do exactly the same thing. So if they come back to you a little bit, or they allow you to apply some pressure, then attack harder, and if it doesn't work, then go back. It's like tides going in and out. I guess so, and that's overly simplistic, because what Rohit and India would have banked upon was that England wouldn't have the skill or the temperament to kind of go to row back once they'd gained the advantage. They would have imagined that what would happen was that they'd gain an advantage, they'd get the close infielders out, would continue to attack exactly the same way, and then let you back in by giving their wickets away. And that isn't what happened. So under those circumstances, I remember captaining the game many moons ago where it seemed as though the opposition was so far in front that you're sort of sitting back and waiting for them to declare. And I thought, well, it makes no difference. It already seems like they've got too many. Sod it, we'll just put everyone around the bat, and hopefully get off the field faster. And unbelievably, it was like, what else are you going to do? They're already too far away. You put everyone around the bat in a situation where the opposition is totally on top, and bowled them out in no time. Ian Ward and Jimmy Ormond saw us home chasing 420 or something in the final, won the game. It was bizarre. It was incredible how just by going, I know you're on top, but we're now going to attack you rather than defend, sort of change the entire flow of the game. But it's not something you see. You don't see it in Test match cricket very often. You don't find scenarios whereby the team that should be bossing the game is kind of being pushed around, and so they imagine, as I think everybody else would have done, well, okay, well, if we sit back for a little while, England will slog it up in the air, and we'll roll them over and win the game, which is what makes Pope's innings so special. Kind of batsmanship of the highest quality.
It sort of went under the radar a little bit because of how extraordinary Shoaib Bashir's call-up was, but Tom Hartley's call-up was extraordinary in its own way. He'd only played 20 first-class games, had an okay but not extraordinary 2023 with the red ball. For him to get selected after how difficult his first 2 days were with the ball, and then to produce that on the final day, it was an extraordinary performance. Rob Key and his selectors have made a lot of decisions and got the calls right since they came in. You think back to Duckett coming in as opener, sticking with Crawley, bringing in Tongue last summer, doing well straight away, and now Hartley now. That is actually one of the key reasons to the success under these guys.
Yeah, and the Hartley selection is an interesting one, because it's almost based around sort of what he does for Manchester Originals and 100, or for Lancashire in the Blast. Pitches that turn a little bit, bowl the ball quickly, Axar Patel style or Jadeja style, I suppose. And they thought that if the pitches were going to rag hard as they expected them to, that somebody who had the natural ability without having to try and change something when you got there would come in very handy given the right set of conditions. And I guess what happened was, in the first innings, the right set of conditions weren't there, and the man's making his debut and he's nervous as all hell, and he doesn't bowl particularly well. then the team puts him in a position where they kind of, they got this massive chance on a last day pitch, and he does pretty much what they expected him to do. They wouldn't have been surprised. Everybody else would have been. I mean, it's the thing is, it keeps happening. It's happened so often under their stewardship with players that you just think, well, how does that work? Where does that selection come from? Or you can see the talent there, but you're just thinking, well, they've got nothing to back it up. How are they going to fare underneath the most stringent pressure? And what happens is they get back to the hill. They have the belief of a bloke who pulls off blind runouts backhanded, and they find themselves in positions whereby they're suddenly on top unexpectedly, and the opposition absolutely poos themselves about it, because you just think, oh my God, it's happening again. They're doing it again. I'm just so delighted for all of them. If Hartley, if he never has another day like that in his Test match career, that is a story he will tell forever, and be proud of forever. But you get the feeling that he might have a few more.
Yeah, I mean, it sets up the series perfectly, and especially with India now have gone 3 home Test matches without a win. They've lost 2 out of their last 3. And there are questions over Gill's form. Kohli's not back yet. There's a very short turnaround between the first and second Test, so England got actually, with the momentum they got in the last 2 days, huge opportunity to go 2-0 up.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of sort of thinking probably on the Indian side about do we change the conditions a little bit? Do we make it a little bit flatter and kind of perhaps give our more skilled performers a bit more of a chance, and kind of. But then there'd also then be the fear that, crikey, if we make it a bit flatter and England decide to go nuts on us, then we've got a problem as well. There was one thing maybe that we got right in the lead up to all of this, and that was that without Kohli, that India's batting lineup looked gettable. If you got rid of, didn't allow Rohit to make big runs, and you kind of felt that there wasn't enough cold-eyed killers in that lineup to kind of to keep England out if they performed extremely well, and that turned out to be the case. But basically got everything else wrong, didn't we?
Yeah, pretty much. Just on the Indian batting, when you watch them in white ball cricket, you watch the IPL, it looks like the talent pool is just endless. Another kid comes that you never heard of. He's come from the under-19s. He instantly looks majestic. He looks like he's ready for international cricket. But the Test top 6, top 7 has been in a bit of a funk for quite a long time now. Why do you think India are struggling to progress clearly really, really talented players to the Test top 6?
Well, I don't underestimate the pressure that these guys feel when they come in to play for India, I guess. You're treading in the footsteps of Tendulkar and Kohli and Gavaskar and all the rest of it, and batsmanship in the way that it should be done, or the way that that they feel is the classical way of playing in India. And it's hard, and they've also come in in a situation where it might be easier to score runs away from home than it is at home, which none of the illustrious names that I mentioned before have ever had to do. They sort of come in, play on surfaces that were very very recognisable to them, and make big runs immediately. These guys come in and it's rag and square, and sort of spin bowlers they'd never heard of are kind of difficult to play, and that's hard. So that's something that they've kind of brought upon themselves a little bit, I think, and something that only the very best are able to kind of weather over a long period of time. So. It'll be absolutely fascinating to see what happens with the surfaces here on in. Do they go again? Go harder, make them spin more? I don't know. Or do they kind of go, hang on, should we see what happens if we try and play some normal cricket against these guys, and give their inexperienced spinners a bit less of a chance to kind of do what they did to us in this game?
Well, it's only a few days until we find out. Cheers for your time, Butch. Catch you next week. Away from Hyderabad at the Gabba today, just as Tom Hartley was going about his work. West Indies sealed one of the all-time great Test match wins. It's their first win in Australia for 27 years. Their first win against Australia anywhere in 21 years. They won by 8 runs, defending 216 at the Gabba. The hero by a mile was Shamar Joseph, who only made his debut in the first test of that series. He took 7 for 68, bowling a 12-over spell that was only interrupted by the lunch break. A feat made all the more remarkable that less than 24 hours previously, he retired hurt after getting a Mitchell Starc Yorker on the toe. And we were speculating in the office that so new he is to professional cricket, it is entirely feasible that he doesn't have the top equipment that is generally given to international players. And we mentioned his story the other day, but it is totally remarkable. You know, he played he's 24 years old. He's from a village in Guyana that is so remote that it didn't have colour TV or the internet until I think 6 years ago. He was working as a security guard 2 years ago. And he hadn't played his first game of professional cricket 12 months ago. And he's come in, he can bowl 90 miles per hour. And he's quite a pure bowler, I'd say, in terms of he just takes the pitch out of the equation. He bowls lots of Yorkers, does good players for pace. And he was the difference. He took 7 wickets today. Alzari Joseph took a couple, took a 5 from the first test match. And not only was it an amazing performance, not only was it an amazing story, just the scenes at the end were amazing. When he bowls Hazelwood, he goes on an amazing run. King Cricket, go to their website, did a really nice write-up of the winning moment and how special it was. And, you know, you had Brian Lara on commentary, shedding tears whilst saying that West Indies cricket stands tall today. We've been written off. Craig Brathwaite gave a very punchy interview after the game where he name-checked, was it Rodney Hogg?
Yeah.
Who said they were weak.
Pathetic and hopeless.
And said those are the 2 words that motivated them.
Yeah.
You know,
and then said, "Are these muscles big enough for you?" Which is just a great line. While flexing his bicep, like yeah.
Amazing win. This Australia don't lose very often at home. You know, to do them at the Gabba, and obviously they lost at the Gabba against India a few years ago, but this is a very strong Australia side. It is also a West Indies side that is missing the likes of Carl Mayers and Jason Holder, who opted out of the tour to play in the ILT20. Several players in this squad with barely any experience. Chanderpaul's played fewer than 10 tests. Kirk McKenzie, Athenaeus, Kavim Hodge, Justin Greaves, Kevin Sinclair, Shamar Joseph. That's a lot of names there who haven't played a lot of test cricket. So for them to get a win like this, they were 64 for 5 in the first innings and managed to get up to 311. Kept Steve Smith quiet. I mean, Smith actually quietly played an amazing innings today. 91 not out, opening the batting, carrying his bat for Australia, but not quite being able to get them over the line.
An extraordinary scoop shot as well, just when it seemed like Australia might snatch it. Yeah.
Incredible win.
Yeah. And you know, the England game was, people look back on it as the better game in some respects, but that winning moment in the West Indies game, the emotion of that was like nothing else.
Yeah.
It was, and yeah, just go and watch that and watch it over and over and over again. Just the way that they're like, 'cause you've got to remember that Shamar Joseph, I mean, maybe his toe is fractured, we don't know. And
he was limping considerably anytime he wasn't sprinting into bowl.
Yeah, exactly. and the other time he wasn't limping was when he was sprinting away, having taken that final wicket. At that point, he didn't need to run anymore, but he was just doing it because of how much that the emotion was going through.
The West Indies players said they didn't know that he was going to take the field until about an hour before play.
Well, he wasn't planning to go to the ground. He was talking to the team doctor, and the doctor was like, "Well, at least come in and you can support the guys even if you can't bowl." And he comes in and he works some sort of magic on that toe, and then he bowls like that. And you're absolutely right about the because I guess it was kind of a primal simple kind of fast bowling in terms of it was fast and it was at the stumps, and there were a lot of bowl dismissal in there today, but and he got a bit of tap at one point from Mitchell Starc, but there was still you still have to get it on the right line enough times to be threatening with that sort of pace, and you have to have that sort of pace against. And actually, when you look at what that West Indies attack could be for that series against England in the summer, you add in Jaden Seals, was he injured for this series? So you add him back into it, and all of a sudden it's
That's an attack that will cause problems for any batting lineup in the world.
Exactly. And good bowling attacks, in some ways more than good batting lineups, is what wins you test matches at times, because you can, batters can sort of scratch you up to something, and then the bowlers blow you
100%.
away. But if you can't take 20 wickets, you won't be able to. But West Indies have
Yeah.
all of a sudden a very, very good looking bowling attack.
100%. Ian writes into us, I love the podcast and listen to every new episode that is released. With the West Indies' fantastic win in Australia, led by Shamar Joseph, and England potentially winning this test match in India, do you believe that this will make the world stand up and appreciate what the beauty of test match cricket actually is, and reconsider how nations have funding allocated to them? It is quite clear that smaller nations cannot sustain regular tests under the current model, but surely we can recognise that test cricket is still the pinnacle of emotions when you have won a test match after 4 or 5 days of hard graft and toil. That has to be something that's worth preserving, doesn't it? Well, you're preaching to the choir here. We absolutely love our test cricket. Obviously, I thought there's a really good tweet actually from Barney Rana, who sort of summed up the ridiculousness of the current situation with test cricket and how poorly it's financed from the wider governing bodies.
Here's that tweet. What a game test cricket is. Cut to the bone, but still a different level to every other format. Its death is a paradigm of dumb consumerism. Money and margins tell you to make a worse product, at the end of which you have money for a while and a worse product forever.
Amen to that.
Yes.
Also, if there's anyone who's really, really, really rich listening to the podcast, just put some money into test cricket. Fund the West Indies. I mean, I thought it was quite telling that pretty much as soon as the game was done, Ian Bishop took to Twitter, who was commentating on the game in Brisbane, and he was saying, people just need to make sure Joseph has enough money to protect it, because it's not just these guys choose to play other formats. For someone as fast as Joseph, if he gets worn out by playing in all these leagues, because that's the only way for him to make significant money in the game, if that affects his pace, then you lose something special, and that needs to be preserved. And at the moment, there's no power for any body within West Indies cricket to do that. So if you are really, really, really rich and you're listening to this, please do consider investing in test cricket. I'm still amazed that so many people put money into T20 cricket, and another new league springs up, and it's no difference. There's no obvious difference between that and the previous league that's just been set up, and no one's done something about test cricket, because when you get a finish like that, it just doesn't really compare to anything else.
Yeah, you stick however many million into staging like a proper test World Cup maybe that everything builds into, and you even had in this game just a small little act of self-sabotage in terms of the ticket prices for today. Coming in overnight, it was 160 runs needed, 8 wickets to win
on a weekend.
And they kept the prices at at full price, having clearly not sold very many. So I was talking to a dad on Twitter who just assumed that they would lower the prices and he'd be able to take his family along, and had told his kids, we're going to go and watch some test cricket. And it was like, oh, actually, we're not going to be able to afford this. And in England we saw how great that was in the first Stokes McCullum summer, when they started letting people in for free and then for £5 on the last day. Just if that had been the case today, I think that would have and a bit of a marketing push behind that. You get people in, and all of a sudden that is a day that plays out in front of a massive backdrop. Whereas as it was
3,000,
as great as it was to be able to hear the West Indies sort of like yelling and whooping as they took that final wicket, you shouldn't be able to hear that, and you shouldn't be able to hear one guy in the stands clapping in the bowler every time in a massive stadium like that. And I mean, if someone rich is listening, first sponsor us, then sponsor test cricket, get something that allows boards to enough money that allows boards to prioritize it, match fees for players that allow them to choose to play it and to have it as a viable career, and have a showpiece event and structure that is befitting of the best thing that we've ever made in a sporting context.
100%. We're going to just play a short bit of the interview we had with Kemar Roach a few months ago, because as amazing as today was, I don't think we should lose sight of the current predicament for nations such as the West Indies. So this is Roach giving his honest view on where Test cricket is at, not just only in the West Indies, but in the inverted commas smaller nations. You started playing Test cricket in 2009, now in 2023. How worried are you about the state of Test cricket as a man who still thrives at the top of it?
Yeah, it's worrying. There's a lot of franchises around the world now. There's a lot of franchises. Cricket all year round. Let's be honest. People are looking after their livelihoods now, so they're chasing dollar. They're chasing money. It's understandable. Cricket is a very short career. If you want to maximize your talents as much as possible and obviously earn to take care of yourself and your families, I can understand why people do that. only the big nations like the Indias, the Australias, the Englands, they get their 10 to 15 test matches a year. But in terms of the smaller nations, some guys don't think it's feasible. You only play 6 test matches in a year. That's not good. For me, my last test match was against India. That was in July? And I'm not playing another test match until January next year. So that's a long, long layoff. And we're going to Australia, which is probably the toughest tour we could ever go on. Franchises have taken over, and that's the fact of it. I have a love for Test cricket. I don't know what needs to be done, what people need to do to improve the state of Test cricket. But
do you worry that love might, for future generations of players, dwindle a little bit?
I think it's gone already. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
I think it's gone already. I think a lot of youngsters are more into T20 cricket. That's where they're excited about it.
These are young current professionals, do you think?
Yeah. Young current professionals. Well, some of the ones that I know, Test cricket isn't, I just say it's not feasible. They don't look at it as feasible. And it's bad. It's bad. When I grew up, that's the only thing I knew. Obviously, T20 cricket wasn't big at that time, but it was all about red ball cricket. Now, as you said, the ability to play and make a lot more money than you would make playing red ball cricket. I think guys are looking at that more than actually the love of the game and obviously what you can achieve in a career and create a legacy. It's all about the franchises, man. It's more attractive financially, obviously, entertainment-wise. So a lot of younger guys are dwelling towards the franchise cricket, which is killing Test cricket, I would say.
That is everything for today's show. Cheers, Ben. Cheers for listening along to all the daily shows. We'll be back for a fatter weekly episode in 2 or 3 days' time.